So yeah, you could happily blow well over £1,000 on one of these stupidly expensive bricks here, or you could save yourself a packet and snaffle one of the best mid-range Android mobiles instead. After all, the likes of Samsung, Xiaomi, Nothing and OnePlus offer phones that cost loads less than an iPhone 15, but still boast serious game and grunt, gorgeous displays that aren't half obscured by some dynamic island box, and capable cameras for capturing all of the exciting things you pack into your everyday existence. In my case, drinking. So here's my personal pick of the very best mid-range smartphones right now, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Pish, I say. Pish. Now first up, if you really fancy one of Google's flagship phones but you can't afford that asking price, well, you can save yourself a few quid and grab the Pixel 7a instead. Despite being cheaper, it's almost exactly as good as the regular Pixel 7 flagship. Sure, those materials aren't quite as premium, but the Pixel 7a looks just as stunning as its flagship brothers, and the hand feel is truly magnificent. The brains of this mini mid-ranger is once again the Tensor G2 chipset, and yes, this does mean that the Pixel 7a gets a bit warm to the touch at times, but this phone can happily run anything you chuck at it, even games like Genshin. That dinky 6.1-inch OLED screen is another 90Hz slice of eye pleasing heaven, while the stereo speaker setup ain't too shabby either. And the software side, of course, is just as satisfying as always. You've got those lovely stock Android vibes, no heavy clunky launchers chucked on top. You've got excellent security and privacy features, and of course, as it's Google, years of software support. Plus, you will struggle to find a better smartphone snapper at this sort of price. Between the fresh 64MP quad bay camera sensor and the Tensor's slick image processing smarts, you will once again be treated to great looking pics, even in some pretty rough conditions. However, be warned that the Pixel 7a's battery life isn't quite as good as some of the other blowers in this best mid-range mobile roundup, so if you're rarely seen without your smartphone in hand, you might want to consider something else. Now, one of the Pixel's most impressive rivals at this sort of price is the OnePlus Nord 2T, which boosts the overall performance for any proper gaming fans out there. The OnePlus Nord 2T is powered by MediaTek's Bicep Flexing Dimensity 1300 chipset, which can absolutely blaze its way through any Android game out there. Good old Genshin is handled with nary a bead of sweat, helped along by those dedicated gaming tools. You've once again got yourself an OLED screen, this time a 6.43-inch AMOLED panel, with the added bonus of a faster 90Hz refresh rate, as well as another decent enough stereo speaker setup. So the OnePlus Nord 2T is just as great for kicking back with some Netflix action or your favourite bold tech twat. The Nord 2T's 4500mAh battery serves up enough screen on time to make it through a pretty long intensive day, even for fairly demanding users, and it also supports 80W fast charging when you bung a cable in it as well, which is pretty ridiculous at this sort of price point. Oxygen OS is as customizable as ever, with the guarantee of a few years of software updates to keep it fresh and secure. And while that 50MP primary camera sensor can't quite capture pics as cleanly and as capably as the Pixel, it is still well up to the job of everyday snaps and sharp looking home movies. You can grab yourself the Nord 2T at a great price on the OnePlus UK website. It has actually been succeeded by the OnePlus Nord 3, but when it came to the official launch, OnePlus was like, "Do one mate," to Blighty. You can actually grab one now in the UK, again from that OnePlus website. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to actually test it out yet. And also, if your budget can't quite stretch to these Nord smartphones, well, no worries. For a bit less cash, you can grab yourself a OnePlus Nord CE3 Lite. It might be cheaper, but it's still a very capable wee bugger. The design has been downgraded to plastic, but spruced up a bit with a lovely lime paint job, while the OLED screen is swapped out for a more basic LCD panel. However, those visuals are still sharp and the refresh rate is boosted to 120Hz. You once again have a stereo speaker setup, this time with added headphone jack goodness. Well, that sizable 5000mAh capacity battery means all day play, no worries, unless you absolutely torture the living heck out of this thing, complete with nippy 67W fast charging when you do run dry. Gaming is smooth and satisfying on lighter titles like PUBG and Call of Duty Mobile, and even Genshin Impact if you keep the graphics settings low, helped along again by that gaming mode, while the Snapdragon 695 chipset handles everything else just as capably. Even the 108MP camera is a bit of a cracker, serving up good looking pics in all kinds of difficult conditions. Now, another decent option for a mid-range budget is Samsung's fresh new Galaxy A54, which is a big old step up over last year's clunky and rather disappointing A53. For a start, that glass finish looks and feels almost as premium as the S23 flagship, with a choice of 4 colours, all of them awesome if you're inclined to believe Samsung's naming scheme. Is this awesome line model actually awesome? Am I in awe right now? No, it's just rather pretty. However, I do absolutely adore the IP67 dust and water resistance, which is tricky to find at this price outside of the Pixel phone. And Sammy fans will enjoy the feature-filled One UI 5 experience that's not too different from those flagship blowers. Unlike Google with its Pixel phone, Samsung has guaranteed several years of Android OS and security updates with the Galaxy A54, so you shouldn't have to replace it anytime soon. The 6.4-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED screen gets a thumbs up, chucking out sharp Full HD Plus images complete with Samsung's trademark colours that positively pop, although you can opt for a more natural output if you want. It's definitely a good one for your Disney Plus and your Netflix and your Crunchyroll and all that good stuff. You've even got microSD memory card support and a bit of NFC action, of course, for your contactless payments, although there's no headphone jack action, boo, hiss, etc. And likewise, I found that the 5000 mAh capacity battery can keep you going all day long, no worries. Thankfully, despite being powered by another Samsung chipset, the Galaxy A54 serves up a much smoother everyday experience than the older A53, even coping quite well with Genshin Impact and heavier gaming titles. And Samsung has even upgraded the camera tech for this year's model, so it's a bit better in lower light, although that lethargic shutter speed can scupper some of your shots of living subjects. And for a bit more cash, Samsung also offers the Galaxy S23 FE, the fan edition, which will cost you £599 here in Blighty. It's basically a slightly stripped back version of that S23 flagship. And my full S23 FE review should be live in the next week or so, but spoiler alert, there are better options out there, and the regular Galaxy S23 should be heavily discounted rather soon because the S24 series launches in January 2024. Now, certainly one of the more distinctive smartphones you'll find at this price range is the Nothing Phone 1, which starts from 399 quid and offers some decent specs to again rival that Google Pixel 6a. Forget the flashy lights on the back end, because chances are, after piddling about with them for your first day or two, you'll basically forget they even exist. To me, that Glyph lighting is just like an attention-seeking child absolutely off its tits on Haribo. But get past all that attention-seeking bollocks and you'll find you've got yourself a very capable mid-range mobile. After several updates, the various bugs and the less than impressive battery life have mostly thankfully been sorted right out. And not only can you now just about generally squeak through a full day of use on just a single charge, but you've also got support on the Nothing Phone 1 for wireless charging, which is an incredibly rare feature at this sort of price. That OLED screen is a delight like most rivals, the stereo speaker setup is decent, and this blower is nippy enough to play any game out there, Genshin Impact included. Plus, if you want an Android that looks like an iPhone for whatever friggin' reason, this is probably about the closest you'll come with its chunky flat-edged frame. Nothing's camera setup is gloriously streamlined, so you won't find any pointless macro nonsense or any of that other bollocks here, and it's good enough to grab good-looking pics and home movies even in reasonably testing conditions. It's only really in proper low light where that camera stumbles a bit and the Pixel 6a starts to show its dominance, but apart from that, it's hard to really nitpick much about the Nothing Phone beyond the usual complaints like the lack of a headphone jack, the lack of micro SD memory card support, yada yada. And Nothing has recently launched a more premium version of the Nothing Phone, currently called the Nothing Phone 2. Although a more accurate title would be the Nothing Phone Plus, because it's not actually replacing the original Nothing Phone, it's just an alternative option if you've got a bit more cash to splash and you want something a bit more jazzy, a bit more beefy, a bit more all that. The Nothing Phone 2 is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, which should mean smoother performance for longer, while the slightly larger battery combined with that energy efficient chipset means you'll get a wee bit longer out of every charge. You've got a bigger, brighter display, you've got an upgraded rear and front camera, and that Glyph disco lighting has been redesigned with even more zones than before, plus some nifty new features. It's certainly a solid rival to the likes of the Pixel 7, and my full review is live right now. Now, Vivo's smartphones are a bit tricky to get a hold of here in Blighty, but the Vivo V29 and V29 Pro could be worth tracking down, especially if you fancy a super slim design with a curved display. And in the case of the regular V29, you've also got a dazzling selection of bright and bold colours. Both Vivo blowers dish up a spacious 6.78-inch AMOLED screen with pin-sharp 1.5K resolution, plus HDR10+ streaming support if you like your movies, and 120Hz refresh for your games. Factor in the boppy stereo speaker setup and the V29s are cracking for a bit of Netflix on the go. The regular V29 has Qualcomm Snapdragon 778G packed inside, while the Pro model upgrades that to MediaTek's Dimensity 8200. So both of these phones can cope with Genshin Impact, although not on the higher graphics settings, and despite those cooling layers, they will still occasionally warm your hands when you're gaming in winter. Serious gamers should look elsewhere, maybe find something with a flat display instead. But Vivo does at least cram in a great selection of gaming tools. And this dandy duo somehow have a 4600 mAh capacity battery crammed inside with some nippy 80-watt flash charge action. Whoa! That Pro model also offers an upgraded 50 megapixel camera, which is usually pretty good for your everyday snaps, despite some occasional post-processing jank. And both models also rock Vivo's fancy pants Aura Flash, which can be manually adjusted to make the tone either warmer or colder. Now, if you want a fancy looking blower stashed in your shorts but you don't want to pay premium prices, well, the Honor 90 is well worth a squint. It's a proper stunner with a curvy design that's also pleasingly tough. And it's good to see Honor offering 3 years of software updates here as well, although admittedly not everyone will get on with that Magic OS launcher. It's a wee bit bulky at times, and frankly it does occasionally get on my tits. Still, you've got loads of storage to make up for the lack of memory card support, while that 6.7-inch AMOLED screen is sharp, supremely bright and creamy smooth, topping off at 120Hz. Audio is less impressive however, as the Honor 90 only serves up a single solitary speaker. But power is provided by an accelerated Snapdragon 7 Gen 1, which can capably cope with any game you chuck at it. A massive vapor chamber helps to keep the Honor 90 nice and cool when you're smashing 10 bells out of hairy Hillgoits in Genshin, and you've got yourself loads of gaming tools to make your violent virtual shenanigans even more enjoyable. Despite that slender frame, Honor has somehow managed to cram a 5000 mAh capacity battery inside of the Honor 90, so I found I never ran out of juice. Certainly had plenty left in the tank when I was clambering into my PJs at night time. And you got pretty nippy 66-watt wired recharging speeds as well, although admittedly no wireless recharging here. As for that 200 meg primary camera, well, it's not bad at all for everyday shots with decent HDR chops. Although photos can look a wee bit flat, and bright vibrant colours don't really pop the way that I really hoped they would, while softer lighting makes for quite grainy pics. If photography is a priority, you'll be better served by that Pixel for sure. Now, any gaming fans out there looking for a dependable device should have a proper good squint at one of my favourites, the Poco F4 GT. This absolute unit is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which can run a little bit hot but also blaze its way through any Android title out there, helped by Poco's rather essential cooling tech. The gaming chops are further cemented by some very handy pop-up shoulder triggers, which can really take the pain out of more complex titles. Plus, the 4700 mAh capacity battery means you can game for a good few hours on this Poco phone before you'll need to plug it back in, while the 120-watt charging support means you can power this bugger right back up to full in less time than it takes for James Corden to annoy the living piss out of me. Poco's 6.67-inch AMOLED display is a proper stunner, bold and bright with full Dolby Vision support, and compatible games can enjoy up to a 120Hz refresh rate for a fluid finish. There's also Dolby Atmos action with crisp audio spaffed out by the quad speaker arrangement. Overall, cracking stuff for watching flicks as well as playing games, although not everyone will get on with the MIUI launcher that is slapped on top of all of Poco and Xiaomi smartphones. It's crammed full of crapware, and also the OS updates and the security updates tend to dwindle out after just a year or two, compared with the years of support that you'll get from the likes of a Samsung or a Pixel. A pair of fresher mid-range options for 2023 are the Poco F5 and Poco F5 Pro, which cost around 70 quid more. These beasts are nearly 6.7 inches in size and similar in many ways. For instance, they both sport a 64 meg camera with optical image stabilization, backed by an 8 meg ultra-wide angle lens and a 2 meg macro shooter, although the Pro can shoot 8K video thanks to the beefier chipset that's stuffed inside. You got a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 running the show on the Poco F5 Pro, which was the brains of many a flagship phone just last year. So unsurprisingly, this meaty mid-ranger is a fantastic option for gamers. But that said, the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 that powers the bog standard Poco F5 is still more than nippy enough to handle the biggest Android games. Both of these Pocos rock a 120Hz AMOLED screen, although the Pro's panel is sharper, brighter and boasts Dolby Vision support. And either way, you've got a stereo speaker setup and a generous 256 gigs of storage. The regular Poco 5 does have one upper on its more expensive sibling as well, in the fact it's actually got a headphone jack, which is an increasingly rare feature in 2023 for any mobile. You won't find one of those on the Pro, for instance. And the Pro's battery is a smidge bigger than the regular Poco F5s, but both will last you a long intensive day on a single charge, no worries at all. And you've got nippy 67-watt wired recharging, although only the Pro can be charged wirelessly. So overall, two cracking phones boasting brilliant specs for a mid-range price, as long as you don't mind all of that MIUI shenanigans. And for under 400 quid, you can also grab yourself the Poco X5 Pro, which boasts a 6.67-inch 120Hz OLED screen and 5000 mAh battery. But while the camera's megapixel count has been boosted to 108 meg, that performance has been kicked down a bit to a Snapdragon 778G. That said, the X5 Pro can still handle games like Genshin Impact, Call of Duty, etc. without bursting a blood vessel, and it looks rather tasty doing so in this bright yellow jacket. Another solid mid-range choice is the Xiaomi Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus 5G. Clunky name for sure, but a decent handset boasting smooth performance thanks to the Dimensity 1080 chipset. That MediaTek brain can breeze through games of Genshin Impact on regular settings, while battery life is also rather decent. And even if you do run dry during the day for whatever reason, well, no worries, the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus 5G supports 120-watt fast charging again, which is proper mental. The massive 6.7-inch Super AMOLED screen is another stunner, supporting Dolby Vision streaming shenanigans plus 120Hz refresh. You've also got a stereo speaker arrangement, a headphone jack, all the goodies we love to see. On the software side, it is once again Xiaomi's MIUI launcher in all of its batshit mental splendor, complete with those tardy rollouts. But one of the true standout features is the 200 meg main camera sensor, which can capture great looking evening shots thanks to the clever Clogs pixel binning tech. But, and it is a big old but, the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus will be succeeded by the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus in the imminent future. This bad boy has already launched over in China, it's just awaiting a proper global release. It's another beefy 6.67-incher, same as the previous model, but this time with a slightly curved screen as well as a leather style finish. And if you don't like the patchwork colour effort here, you can grab the Note 13 Pro Plus in basic black or white. The frame may be made of plastic, but you've got Gorilla Glass Victus up front, and this phone is IP68 water and dust resistant, so it can handle getting a bit wet. MIUI is once again a love it or hate it style scenario, but you've got a generous 256 gigs of storage, which is pretty much impossible to hate on. And that 6.67-inch OLED display isn't just sharper than the older model, it's also super bright. Performance is upgraded to the beefcake MediaTek Dimensity 7200 Ultra, with 12 gigs of that RAM stuff to help keep your apps and games running as well as possible. So even Genshin Impact, won't have this phone evacuating its metaphorical bowels. And you've got the same battery tech as that Note 12 Pro Plus as well, a mighty 5000 mAh capacity cell shoved inside of there with 120-watt hypercharge support. Although once again there's sod all love for wireless charging. And those camera specs may also sound strangely familiar, with another 200 meg main shooter for capturing your precious memories and sharing them with absolute strangers on social media. And if you've got a wee bit more cash to spunk out on your next blower, well, I would heartily recommend the Xiaomi 13T. This also looks proper smart with its fake leather finish, although there is a glass model if you don't really fancy it. And it's once again a water resistant finish for those moist moments. The Xiaomi 13T also comes with a bit of added peace of mind with 5 years of security updates and 4 years of OS updates as well, plus that same generous 256 gigs of storage. That 6.67-inch AMOLED screen is similar to the Redmi's, but this time you got both HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision support. And that peak brightness is higher, and the refresh scales all the way up to a creamy smooth 144Hz. Fantastic news for any gamers. Speaking of which, that performance is also a step up thanks to MediaTek's Dimensity 8200 Ultra, which is kept nice and cool thanks to Xiaomi's stainless steel vapor chamber shenanigans. However, when you drain that 5000 mAh capacity battery, you are refilling with comparably slower 67 watts so-called hypercharge. I mean, that's being rather facetious. It's still super fast compared with what you get on a Samsung, a Google, an Apple phone, which costs, twice as much. Although still bugger all wireless charging support here. And while that 50 meg main camera may sound like a bit of a downgrade, you do have some proper Leica processing smarts which help to produce sharp, detail-packed snaps at pretty much any time of day. Plus a very respectable feature-packed Pro mode and a 50 meg telephoto camera for getting a bit closer to the action. So overall, the Xiaomi 13T is a bit of a banger and well worth that mid-range asking price. And for my final mid-range smartphone recommendations right now, let's turn our attention to good old Realme. Starting with the Realme GT Master Edition, which at just over 300 quid is a bit of a bargain. This slick looking 6.4 inch blower boasts many of the same advantages as its peers, including a gorgeous Samsung Super AMOLED panel with 120Hz refresh, a proper bit of eye candy when you're streaming endless Netflix or blasting through your favourite games, all of which run beautifully courtesy of the Snapdragon 778G chipset and dedicated cooling tech. And you got full 5G support as well as Wi-Fi 6 connectivity as well, so no endless buffering when you're trying to enjoy a nice bit of tentacle hentai action. Did I say tentacle hentai action? I obviously meant streaming a good bit of classic British sitcom action on BritBox. Yeah, bit of Urang Malord. Good stuff. The 4300 mAh battery isn't as big as some others in this roundup, but you shouldn't struggle to last a full day, while there's 65 watt super dart charge support if you need to give it a top up. And Realme's 64 meg rear camera and 32 meg selfie shooter are pretty respectable for this price point too. One of the most recent mid-rangers to launch globally is the Realme 10 Pro Plus, and while it's not officially come to the UK just yet, I've got all of my fleshy bits crossed that this gorgeous blower does make it here soon. This 6.7 inch smartphone is ridiculously thin and light, with a display that pretty much entirely fills that front end. I have experienced some slight responsiveness issues as the screen does curve around the edges, so it is easy for your palm flab to intrude. But that's one of my only real complaints here. Besides that, the Realme 10 Pro Plus is mostly a joy to use. That 120Hz OLED screen is matched with a powerful stereo speaker setup, so movies and games look and sound fantastic. And speaking of games, MediaTek's Dimensity 1080 handles Genshin and other memory-hogging titles impressively well, even on those higher graphics settings. However, that camera once again isn't as good as the Pixel 6a's, often struggling with moving subjects. It's not a bad snapper by any means, it's just not one of the better efforts in this roundup. Now, did I miss out your own favourite mid-range mobile? As I say, these are my personal picks, my favourite mid-range phones that I've personally tested and reviewed. I might have missed out your own, so definitely let us know what it is down in the comments below. Unless it's the iPhone SE, because that is frankly a steaming sack of shit. In the meantime, please do subscribe, do that notifications bell, have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week, and I'll see you on the flip side. Cheers, love you!